If you haven't bought a home before or in a long time, the process can feel really daunting, but it doesn't have to be. In this video, I go through the home buying process. I also offer an in-depth webinar for first-time home buyers where I can get into a lot more detail. I host the webinar live, so there's also Q&A. My website is bradgarner.com, and the link is in the description. You can click that link to register for the webinar. So let's talk about the home buying process. I break this down into 8 steps, starting with the first one, financing, then search for homes, tour homes in person, make an offer, get that offer accepted, work through the contingencies, title, and then close. A good realtor is your expert navigator and guide through this process to make sure that everything goes off without a hitch and that you get the best deal. So the first step is financing, but why is this first? Well, of course, we need to make sure that you're looking at homes that you could actually afford to purchase. But another very important criteria is speed. In a lot of areas, particularly Virginia, where I work, homes can sell pretty fast. What is for sale today might have an offer on it tomorrow. It might be under contract in a few days. So when we find the perfect home, we need to be prepared to make an offer, and that offer needs to include proof of financing. If you're paying cash, then that could be proof of funds. But most of the time, this is going to be a pre-approval letter from a lender. So we need to have that ready to go right at the beginning. Most sellers are not going to seriously consider an offer to purchase a home without proof of financing. You'll be working with a lender, and the lender can look at loan programs that can lower your cost, either lower your down payment or lower your interest rate or both. And if you're a first-time home buyer, there are a lot of programs available to help get you in a home. One other reason for addressing financing early is that not everybody has stellar credit. And if you need some credit repair, say to raise your credit score, that can take a few months. A good lender is going to be able to walk you through that process and let you know what you need to do in order to get your credit score raised the most. I hope you can see why it's so important to line up financing early. Then we get into searching for homes, and I know everybody wants to do this first. This is the fun, exciting phase where you're dreaming about what your next home would be, and you're looking at all the possibilities. You're scrolling through Zillow and Redfin and Realtor.com and other sites, and that's totally fine. But before we get really serious in our search, we need to get that financing step out of the way. When you buy a home, you're not just buying a house, you're buying into a community, into a neighborhood. And I think it's really important to look at the community that you would be joining. How walkable is it? How close are shops and restaurants? How's the traffic? What would your commute look like? And even if you don't have kids, I think it's important to look at school districts because that can have an impact on the long-term value of the home. You're probably already using online tools to search for homes, and I think that's great. There's more data available than ever before, and that can really help educate you about what is available. Are there a lot of homes available in your price range? Are there not many? Should you be looking at a fixer-upper? Are there some new construction homes that are a good fit for you, etc.? In our search, we need to consider how hot is the market. Are houses selling really fast? Are they sitting on the market for a while? Are houses selling for above listing price or below or right about in the middle? This can give us a lot of information about how quickly we need to act and about the ultimate purchase price. Sometimes we might look at listings and not find anything that is a perfect fit for you. And this is where a great agent can tap into some other resources and look for off-market listings. All right, so we've looked at a lot of listings, we've looked at photos, we've checked out neighborhoods, maybe done some drive-bys. It's time to narrow that down to the ones that we actually want to go and see in person. I think one of the first questions is usually, does it look like the photos? The listing photos can be misleading, particularly if they are virtually staged. And listing photos don't usually cover every room in the house, particularly things like closets and utility rooms. On our tour, we want to look for any potential issues. A lot of times these are smells, things like pet odors, maybe rodent odors, were the prior owners smokers, things like in the bathroom, did they just Photoshop all the mold and mildew out of the grout and caulk? Our goal of touring is to get a really solid look and feel for the house and determine, is it the one? Is it the one for you? Can you picture yourself living there? And if it is the one, then let's make an offer. We want to strategize a winning offer. Winning in that you win by getting a good deal, but also winning in that the seller accepts your offer. One of the first things that I do, and I usually do this before we even go and tour the home, is I'll check the price to see if the home is priced appropriately. The seller might have overpriced the home, or they might have priced it in a way that is a really good deal, but we could possibly expect a bidding war. And that gets into competition. So, do we expect that there are going to be other buyers who are going to be putting in offers at the same time as yours? If the home is priced well and it hasn't been on the market very long, then there is a strong chance that there will be other bidders, particularly if homes in that area are selling quickly. If we think that's the case, then we need to look really carefully at your offer in order to make sure that it stands out amongst the pack. In the offer, we need to consider your risk. I always consider your risk. What sort of inspections and contingencies are going to be needed? Contingencies can really protect you as a buyer because they are your kind of escape hatch to get out of the contract if you find out some really negative information or if something goes awry. Contingencies are not so attractive to sellers, so we need to consider whether we should put contingencies in the contract or not. I always think that a home inspection is a good idea, even if the home inspection isn't attached to a contingency. That's the most common one. Financing and appraisal are two other very common contingencies, and I get into all three of those in detail later. In the offer, we might want to ask for some concessions, like the seller paying the buyer's agent fee, the seller paying your closing cost. Both of those are very real possibilities and they happen all the time. If you're looking at new construction, this can also take the form of things like upgrades. Maybe we ask for granite countertops or even a rec room. The offer also needs to include a closing date. This is typically going to be 30 days after the offer was accepted. That gives us enough time to do everything we need to do in the contract period, which I get into next. And I think you can see why that is typically going to take about 30 days. Most sellers are not willing to go much longer than 30 days because we need to make sure that the transaction moves along, especially while the financing is still valid. Of course, offers are not always accepted. Sometimes there's a counter offer and a little bit of negotiation there. But let's say your offer was accepted. Great. Now we are on the clock. We're in the contract period, and then we have 30 days to get a whole bunch of stuff done. A lot has to happen during this contract period, but that's where a good agent comes into play for managing all the deadlines, managing all the parties involved, and making sure that it comes off without a hitch and that you don't have a whole lot to do. The first deadline after the contract is accepted or ratified is the earnest money deposit, usually just referred to as EMD. This is a deposit that shows your good faith as a buyer, that you have skin in the game and that you are ready, willing, and able to purchase the home. This is typically, in my area at least, about 1% of the purchase price, and it is a deposit that counts toward your purchase price. You are able to get the EMD back if the contract does not go through, depending upon why the contract didn't go through. But it's our job as agents to make sure that it does go through. Most of what remains during the contract period is removing those contingencies. So let's get to work. I'm going to quickly walk through the three most common contingencies: inspection contingency, financing, and appraisal contingency. I always think it's really important to get a home inspection, even if it isn't attached to an inspection contingency. This lets you know what is the actual condition of the home. If you are renting, you can call your landlord for repairs. But once you own the home, you can't call the landlord for repairs anymore. You need to do it yourself or call a contractor to do it. You're responsible for the maintenance. So this phase really lets you know what you're getting into. We call a professional home inspector to come and check the house from top to bottom. They look at everything from the roof, the gutters, the plumbing, the electric, the major appliances, the heating and the air conditioning. They look at all of those things to assess the actual condition of those. There is a small cost for the home inspection. And you might be thinking, you just told me I needed to do a earnest money deposit and now pay for an inspection. How much is all of this going to cost? I can't get into all of it in this video to keep it short, but that is why I have the first time homebuyers webinar where I do get into all of those costs and there's Q&A. The link for that is in the description, but let's continue with the inspection. So the professional home inspector is going to give you a report with a laundry list of items that are not perfect about the house. What we need to do is go through that list and figure out what are the small items that are no big deal, very easily repaired, not really a problem, and then others that are bigger deals. Sometimes those can be very doable, that it could be fixed for, almost nothing or a few $100s. At times it can be deal breakers. There are times when there is some information on the inspection report that is so bad that I will advise you just walk away from that house. It is going to be way more trouble than it's worth. But then other times we can try to negotiate these things with the sellers. Let's say the dishwasher is broken. We ask for a new dishwasher. Let's say the air conditioning system doesn't have but maybe a few months left on it. We can ask them to replace that, or more likely in cases like that, we might ask for a credit to cover what it's going to cost to fix it. The inspection contingency is typically going to be around 10 days. And so not only do we need to get a home inspector out there very quickly, do a report and make sense of what the report says, but I might need to tap into my network of contractors in order to get someone out there really quickly to give us a price so that we have something firm that we can use to negotiate those repairs or credits. Financing contingency should be a pretty easy one. If you think back to the beginning when we talked about getting pre-approved for financing, that pre-approval was for you in your financial situation, but it did not address that specific home. The lender does need to lend against that specific home. So the financing contingency should be just updating the financing for the specific home that you want to purchase. If we got a strong pre-approval upfront, and I always recommend desktop underwriting, then this should be no big deal. The big deal with the financing contingency is making sure that the lender meets the deadline. And this is very, very commonly missed. I work with one lender that offers a $30,000 closing guarantee, meaning that they will close on time. And if they do not close on time, you get $30,000. They have never had to pay it because they've never missed a deadline. And that's who you want to work with. The last of the three common contingencies is the appraisal contingency. A lender is going to send an appraiser out to the home just to make sure that the loan value is not more than the appraiser says that it's worth. So if you think all the way back to the beginning when we were talking about touring homes and checking the price to make sure that it was priced appropriately, a good agent is going to head off this situation and really minimize the chance that an appraisal is going to come in low, because we're going to try to make sure that you are never overpaying for a home. There is some potential for negotiation during this phase. Let's say the appraisal comes in for less than the purchase price. Well, there are three different common options that we could take here. One of them is that you could increase your down payment, and we do not want to go there. We don't want you to have to increase your down payment. We don't want you to have to pay any more. We want to look at the other two options. One of them is that we could try to negotiate a lower purchase price. But what's more common is that the appraisal might not be using all the relevant data. Maybe the appraiser missed some comps. Maybe the appraiser didn't understand some of the features in the home. And so what a good agent can do is we can take the data that we have and we can provide the appraiser with some supplemental information. And a lot of times we can get that appraisal where it needs to be. There could be a few other contingencies. If you are in a rural area, then we might want to check well and septic and maybe get a boundary survey. But let's say we get all those contingencies out of the way, then we're ready to roll toward closing. The next step is title, which means we are almost done. And there's normally not much of anything you need to do during the title phase. This phase is when the title company confirms the legal transfer of clean title. Basically, you don't want the great grandson of a prior owner showing up one day, laying claim to the house and saying that it is yours. The title company is going to search all the legal records, make sure that it's a clean title, and that when you get the title, that you absolutely own it. And in case something happens, you're going to have title insurance that is going to cover that. Your job during the title phase is to wait patiently. This is going to be the last week or 2 weeks before closing. It gets very quiet and it can seem like things are going wrong, but actually that means that everything is going right. And then 30 days after your offer is accepted, we go to closing. You got a big old stack of documents to sign, and then you own it. When I bought my first home in 2002, and I was not a realtor then, I remember that closing day really vividly. We scheduled closing for 5 o'clock on a Friday, and the realtor that I was using was friends with the title agent, and the four of us sat around a table and drank wine while we signed about 2 inches worth of documents. These days, closings are online most of the time, so you're probably going to be doing like a DocuSign sort of thing. But I think the old days had their perks. Hopefully, that sheds some light on the home buying process. I didn't get into infinite detail in this video, but I do get into a lot more detail with live Q&A at the webinar that I host. You can find the link for that at bradgarner.com, and that link is in the description. Sometimes people ask me the question, do you need a realtor to buy a home? No, you don't need a realtor to buy a home. You can buy a home completely on your own. I do think that a good agent is going to provide a lot of added value, help you navigate through the process, get you a better deal, and get you to a more successful outcome. That is the value and the service that I try to provide to all my clients. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps me reach a broader audience. This video is for buyers, but I do work with buyers and sellers, and I look forward to helping you find the perfect home for you and to get the most out of your real estate.